Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Aunty Andrea's Reading Corner. I am your delightful host, Andrea Pandrea. It is Monday. I always have to think of what day it is. I don't know why I challenge myself that way. It's not like you guys care. But yeah, so Monday night, November 7th. God, I think. I can't even believe it. Anyway, I got an email from one of my tradesmen saying, oh, we're coming next Tuesday, November 17th. And I was like, what? November 17th is next Tuesday. I'm just like, my mind's blowing. Anyway, time's going so fast. Anyway, hey, Zach, nice to see you there, hun. Bob, hi, good to see you, babe. Mwah. Lisa, I see you there. Nice to have people join me from the top. That's nice. I didn't open any songs or anything like that. I don't know. Actually, I got in shit last week because I used, what was it? For What It's Worth, Buffalo Springfield. And yeah, they like muted half my recording saying it was a copyright infringement and all this stuff. And then they said, was it or wasn't it? I said it wasn't. I don't know. I'm lying. But I mean, what are they going to do? Arrest me? And then next thing you know, I'll be fucking arrested. But anyway, I just decided not to bother this week. And I just thought it best to get right down to it. Anyway, yeah, I hope you all had a good weekend. I had a great weekend. Of course, we found out that President Trump has he's not going to be the president anymore as far as we're concerned. So that's a good thing. I think most people I know agree. We're all in agreement that that's for the best. And that Kamala Harris, and she became vice president, so I'm pretty fucking stoked about that. It's awesome. Well done. What else? It was Mr. and Mrs. Blasky's 50th wedding anniversary. So happy anniversary to you. 50 years is like, it's not a feat, it's a miracle. Like, I was like, yay, you didn't kill each other. Woohoo! But honestly, congratulations. That's just, you never hear about that happening anymore. So you're a shining beacon to us all. Sadly, yesterday, Alex Trebek passed away, and I know we're all pretty sad about that. He is, after all, a Canadian treasure. So God bless you, Alex. We're grateful for all the wonderful years of Jeopardy that you provided us with. I know my mom loved it when she was in the last year before, when she was sick the last year of her life. She became obsessed with Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. Like, would not miss it every night. And she had never been a TV person. I don't know if it was the treatments or whatever it was, but she never missed. And it was so funny because me, Dad, and her were sitting at night watching. And of course, like every now and then you have a good run, like, I'd be like 7, and I'd get it right. And she'd be like, very good, Andrea. And I'd be like, the next one, I go, O.J. Simpson. And she's like, oh my, how do you know all this stuff? I'm like, I don't know. Anyway, it just used to crack me up because she literally never, I don't think she ever guessed, or ever, if she did try to guess, she never really got them. She just really loved the show. So anyway, Alex, I just want to say thank you for entertaining my mother in those really tough days in the end there. And rest well, my dear. What else? I think I'm just going to move right along and get into it because, I find at this time of year, I get tired earlier. So I'd really like to wrap it up around 8 if I can. So I'm just going to big fat do it. Nikki, hi, hon. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. So again, if anybody jumps in who hasn't joined me before, it's the BFG by Roald Dahl. And we're about, I don't know, over 30% of the way through it. Last week, I'm trying to remember what the hell went on last week. Is that all? We're going, I was so upset by this toggle thing. What the hell was it? So let's see if it was back in the waistcoat pocket. Oh yeah, I think they were off. Anyway, who cares? Moving right along. It feels like forever ago last Thursday. So anyway, moving forward, it is, actually no, I haven't read that one. Sorry. Give me a minute here. Gotta get my shit together. Okay, we already did the farting one. After the match, sorry guys, I took my marker out. Bravo, shout out the BFG window. Use very good for a beginner. Okay, I need a temporary intermission thing, like do 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 do. Actually, funny that song came to my head. Put the suitcase on the ground. He bent down low so his enormous face was close to Sophie's. He was catching the dreams. Oh, that was where I was. Weird. Okay. Sorry, guys. Sorry. I think what it is that messed me up is last week I was going to read another chapter. I had planned to read another one. This one I'm going to start now. So I was like thinking I was out of place, but you guys haven't heard this one. So here we go. A Troggle Humper for Flesh Lump Eater. Oh, God. I better have a sip. And away we go. They's always having filthy winks before they go scumpering off to hunt human beings in the evening, the BFG said. He stopped for a few moments to let Sophie have a better look. Giants is only sleeping every then and now, he said. Not nearly as much as human beings. Human beings is crazy for sleeping. Is it ever occurring to you that a human being who is 50 is spending about 20 years sleeping fast? I must admit that never occurred to me, Sophie said. You should allow it to occur to you, the BFG said. Imagine it, please. This human being who says he is 50 has been fast asleep for 20 years and is not even knowing where he is, not even doing anything, not even thinking. It is a funny thought, Sophie said. Exactly, the BFG said. So what I is trying to explain to you is that a human being who says he is 50 is not 50. He is actually 30. Well, what about me? Sophie said. I am 8. No, you is not 8 at all, the BFG said. Human being babies and little chidlers is spending half their time sleeping, so you is only 4. I'm 8, Sophie said. Well, you may think you're 8, the BFG said, but you has only spent 4 years of your life with your little eyes open. You is only 4, and please stop higgling me. Titchy little snapper whippers like you should not be higgling around with an old sage and onions who is hundreds of years more older than you. Well, how much do giants sleep? Sophie asked. Well, they never has wasted much time snozzling, the BFG said. 2 or 3 hours is enough. When do you sleep? Sophie asked. Even less, the BFG answered. I is sleeping only once in a blue baboon. Sophie, peeping out of her pocket, examined the 9 sleeping giants. They looked even more grotesque now than when they were awake. Sprawled out across the yellow plain, they covered an area about the size of a football field. Most of them were lying on their backs, with their enormous mouths wide open, and they were snoring like foghorns. The noise was awful. Suddenly, the BFG gave a jump in the air. By gumfrog, he cried. I was just having the most wopsy-whiffling idea. What? Sophie said. Wait, he cried. Hold your horse feathers. Keeps your skirts on. Just you wait to see what I is going to bring about. He galloped off fast to his cave, with Sophie hanging on tight to the rim of his pocket. He rolled back the stone. He entered the cave. He was very excited. He was moving quickly. You stay where you is in my pocket, Huggy Bee. That's so cute, he said. We is doing this lovely bit of buck-washling both together. He laid aside the dream-catching net, but hung on to the suitcase. He ran across to the other side of the cave and grabbed the long trumpet thing, the one he had been carrying when Sophie had first seen him in the village. With the suitcase in one hand and the trumpet in the other, he dashed out of the cave. What is he up to now? Sophie wondered. When the BFG came near to the sleeping giants, he slowed his pace. He began moving softly. He crept up on his toes toward the ugly brutes. They were still snoring very loudly. They looked repulsive, filthy, diabolical. The BFG tiptoed around them. He went past the gizzard gulper, the blood bottler, the meat dripper, the child chewer. Then he stopped. He had reached the flesh lump eater. He pointed at him. Then he looked down at Sophie and gave her a wink. He knelt on the ground and very quietly he opened up the suitcase. He took out of it the glass jar containing the terrible, nightmarish Troggle Humper. At that point, Sophie guessed what was going to happen next. Ouch, she thought. This could be rather dangerous. She crouched lower in the pocket so that only the top of her head and her eyes were showing. She wanted to be ready to duck out of sight very fast should anything go wrong. They were about 10 feet away from the flesh lump eater's face. The snorting noise he was making was disgusting. Every now and again, a big bubble of spit formed between his two open lips, and then it would burst with a splash and cover his face with saliva. Blah. Taking infinite care, the BFG unscrewed the top of the glass jar and tipped the squiggling, squirming, faintly scarlet trogglehumper into the wide end of his long trumpet. He put the other end of the trumpet to his lips. He aimed the instrument directly at the flesh lump eater's face. He took a deep breath, puffed out his cheeks, and then he blew. Sophie saw a flash of pale red go darting towards the giant's face. For a split second, it hovered above his face. Then it was gone. It seemed to have been sucked up to the giant's nose, but it had all happened so quickly, Sophie really couldn't be sure. Well, we had better be skidding away quick to where it's safe, the BFG whispered. He trotted off for about 100 yards, then he stopped. He crouched low to the earth. Now, he said, we is waiting for the gun and flames to begin. They didn't have long to wait. The air was suddenly pierced by the most fearful roar Sophie had ever heard, and she saw the flesh lump eater's body, all 54 feet of it, rise up to off the ground, and fall back down again with a thump. Then it began to wriggle and twist and bounce about in the most violent fashion. It was quite frightening to watch. "Ah!" roared the flesh lump eater. "Oh, yo!" He's still asleep, the BFG whispered. The terrible troggle-humping nightmare is beginning to hit him. Serves him right, Sophie said. She could feel no sympathy for this great brute who ate children as though they were sugar lumps. "Save us!" screamed the flesh lump eater, thrashing about madly. "He's after me! He's getting me!" The thrashing of limbs and the waving of arms became more and more violent by the second. It was an awesome thing to behold, such a massive creature having such mighty convulsions. "It's Jack!" bellowed the flesh lump eater. "It's the gruesome, gruntious Jack! Oh, Jack is after me! Jack is crackling me! Jack is spike sticking me! Jack is splash splunking me! Oh, it's terrible, fright swiping Jack!" The flesh lump eater was writhing about over the ground like some colossal, tortured snake. "Oh, spare me, Jack!" he yelled. "Don't hurt me, Jack!" "Who is this Jack he's on about?" Sophie whispered. "Jack is the only human being all the giants is frightened of," the BFG told her. "They is all absolutely terrified of Jack. They is all hearing that Jack is a famous giant killer." "Save me!" screamed the flesh lump eater. "Have mercy on this poor little giant. The beanstalk always coming at me with his terrible spine-sticking beanstalk. Take it away. Oh, I is begging you, Jack. I is praying you do not touch me with your terrible spike-sticking beanstalk." "Us giants," the BFG whispered, "is not knowing very much about this dreaded human being called Jack. We is knowing only that he is a famous giant killer and that he is owning something called a beanstalk. We is knowing also that the beanstalk is a fearsome thing, and Jack is using it to kill giants." Sophie couldn't stop smiling. "What are you griggling at?" the BFG asked her, slightly nettled. "I'll tell you later," Sophie said. The awful nightmare had now gripped the great brute to such an extent that he was tying his whole body into knots. "Don't do it, Jack!" he screeched. "Oh, I was not eating you, Jack. I has never eaten human beings. I swear I has never gobbled a single human being in all of my wholesome life." "Liar." "Oh, liar," the BFG said. Just then, one of the flesh lump eater's flailing fists caught the still fast asleep, meat-dripping giant smack in the mouth. At the same time, one of his furiously thrashing legs kicked the snoring, gizzard-gulping giant right in the guts. Both the injured giants woke up and leaped to their feet. Oh, he is swiping me right in the mouth, yelled the meat dripper. He is bung-swoggling me smack in the guts, shouted the gizzard gulper. The two of them rushed at the flesh lump eater and began pounding him with their fists and feet. The wretched flesh lump eater woke up with a bang. He woke straight from one nightmare into another. He roared into battle, and in the bellowing, thumping, rough and tumble that followed, one sleeping giant after another either got stepped on or kicked. Soon, all 9 of them were on their feet, having the most almighty free-for-all. They punched and kicked and scratched and bit and butted each other as hard as they could. Blood flowed. Noses went crunch. Teeth fell out like hailstones. The giants roared and screamed and cursed, and for many minutes the noise of battle rolled across the yellow plain. The BFG smiled, a big, wide smile of absolute pleasure. Always loving it when they is all having a good rough and rumble, he said. They'll kill each other, Sophie said. Oh, never, the BFG answered. Those beasts is always pushing and walloping at each other. Soon it'll be getting dusky, and they'll all be galloping off to fill their tummies. They're coarse and foul and filthy, Sophie said. I hate them. As the BFG headed back to the cave, he said quietly, We certainly was putting that nightmare to good use, though, wasn't we? Excellent use, Sophie said. Well done, you. That's a fun chapter. Next chapter is called Dreams. How am I doing? Yeah, good. The big friendly giant was seated at the great table in his cave, and he was doing his homework. Sophie sat cross-legged on the tabletop nearby, watching him work. The glass jar containing the one and only good dream they had caught that day stood between them. The BFG, with great care and patience, was printing something on a piece of paper with an enormous pencil. What are you writing? Sophie asked him. Oh, every dream is having its special label on the bottle, the BFG said. How else could I be finding the one I'm wanting in a hurry? But can you really and truly tell what sort of dream it's going to be simply by looking at it? Sophie said, or listening to it? I can, the BFG said, not looking up. But how? Is it by the way it hums and buzzes? You is less or more right, the BFG said. Every dream in the world is making a different sort of buzzy humming music, and these grand swashbuckling ears of mine is able to read that music. By music, do you mean tunes? I is not meaning tunes. Then what do you mean? Human beings is having their own music, right or left? Right, Sophie said. Lots of music. And sometimes human beings is very overcome when they is hearing wondrous music. They is getting shivers right down their spindles, right or left? Right, Sophie said. So the music is saying something to them. It is sending a message. I do not think the human beings is knowing what the message is, but they is loving it just the same. That's about right, Sophie said. But because of these jump-squiffling ears of mine, the BFG said, I is not only able to hear the music that dreams is making, but I is understanding it also. What do you mean, understanding it? Sophie said. Well, I can read it, the BFG said. It talks to me. It's like a language. I find that just a little hard to believe, Sophie said. I'll bet you is also finding it hard to believe in quagwinkles, BFG said, and how they is visiting us from the stars. Well, of course I don't believe that, Sophie said. The BFG regarded her gravely with those huge eyes of his. I hope you will forgive me, he said, if I tell you that human beings is thinking they is very clever, but they is not. They is nearly all of them not muchers and squeak pips. I beg your pardon, Sophie said. The matter with human beings, the BFG went on, is that they is absolutely refusing to believe in anything unless they is actually seeing it right in front of their own schnozzles. Of course, quagwinkles is existing. I is meeting them oftenly. I is even chittering to them. He turned away contemptuously, from Sophie and resumed his writing. Sophie moved over to read what he had written so far. The letters were printed big and bold, but were not very well formed. Here's what it said. This dream is about how I is saving my teacher from drowning. I is diving into the river from a high bridge, and I is dragging my teacher to the bank, and then I is giving him the kiss of death. The kiss of what? Sophie said. The BFG stopped writing and raised his head slowly. His eyes rested on Sophie's face. I is telling you once before, he said quietly, that I is never having a chance to go to school. I is full of mistakes. They is not my fault. I do my best. You is a lovely little girl, but please remember that you is not exactly Miss Know Everything yourself. I'm sorry, Sophie said. I really am. I am very rude. It's very rude of me to keep correcting you. The BFG gazed at her for a while longer. Then he bent his head again to his slow, laborious writing. Tell me honestly, Sophie said, if you blew this dream into my bedroom when I was asleep, would I really and truly start dreaming about how I saved my teacher from drowning by diving off of a bridge? More, the BFG said. A lot more. But I cannot be scribbling the whole globe-flunking dream on a titchy bit of paper. Of course, there is always more. The BFG laid down his pencil and placed one massive ear close to the jar. For about 30 seconds, he listened intently. Yes, he said, nodding his great head solemnly up and down. This dream is continuing to very nicely. It has a very Dory hunky ending. How does it end? Sophie said. Please tell me. You would be dreaming, the BFG said, that the morning after you was saving the teacher from the river, you was arriving at school and you was seeing all the 500 pupils sitting in the assembly hall, and all the teachers as well. And the head teacher is then standing up and saying, I's wanting the whole school to give 3 cheers for Sophie because she is so brave and is saving the life of our fine arithmetic teacher, Mr. Figgins, who was unfortunately pushed off the bridge into the river by our gym teacher, Miss Amelia Upscotch. So 3 cheers for Sophie. And the whole school is then cheering like mad and shouting bravo and well done. And forever after that, even when you was getting your sums all gun swiggled around and muddled up, Mr. Figgins is always giving you 10 out of 10 and writing, good work, Sophie, in your exercise book. Then you was waking up. I like that dream, Sophie said. Of course you like it, the BFG said. It's a fizz wizard. He licked the back of the label and stuck it on the jar. I is usually writing a bit more than this on the labels, he said. But you is watching me and making me jumpsy. I'll go and sit somewhere else, Sophie said. Don't go, he said. Look in the jar carefully, and I think you will be seeing this dream. Hey, Amanda. Good to see you, hon. Sophie peered into the jar, and there, sure enough, she saw the faint, translucent outline of something about the size of a hen's egg. There was just a touch of color in it, a pale sea green, soft and shimmering and very beautiful. There it lay, this small, oblong, sea green jellyfish thing, at the bottom of the jar, quite peaceful, but pulsing gently, the whole of it moving in and out ever so slightly, as though it were breathing. It's moving, Sophie said. It's alive. Well, of course it's alive. Well, what do you feed it on? Sophie asked. It's not needing any food, the BFG told her. Well, that's cruel, Sophie said. Everything alive needs some food of some sort, even trees and plants. The north wind is alive, the BFG said. It is moving. It touches you on the cheek and on your hands, but nobody is feeding it. Sophie was silent. This extraordinary giant was disturbing her ideas. He seemed to be leading her towards mysteries that were beyond her understanding. A dream is not needing anything, the BFG went on. If it is a good one, it is waiting peacefully forever until it is released and allowed to do its job. If it is a bad one, it is always fighting to get out. The BFG stood up and walked over to one of the many shelves and placed the latest jar among the thousands of others. "Please, can I see some more of the other dreams?" Sophie asked. The BFG hesitated. "Nobody has ever seen them before," he said. "But perhaps after all I is letting you have a little peep." He picked her up off the table and stood her on the palm of one of his huge hands. He carried her towards the shelves. "Over here are some of the good dreams," he said. "The fizz wizards." "Would you hold me closer so I can read the labels?" Sophie said. "My label is only telling bits of it," the BFG said. "The dream is always usually much longer. The labels is just to remind me." Sophie stared to read the labels. The first one seemed long enough to her. It went right round the jar, and as she read it, she had to keep turning the jar. This is what it said. "Today I is sitting in class, and I discover that if I is staring very hard at my teacher, and if in a special way, I is able to put her to sleep. So I keep staring at her, and in the end, her head drops onto her desk, and she goes fast asleep and snorkles loudly. Then in marches the head teacher, and he shouts, 'Wake up, Miss Plumridge. How dare you go to sleep in class? Go fetch your hat and coat and leave the school forever. You is sacked.' But in a jiffy, I is putting the head teacher to sleep as well, and he just crumples slowly to the floor like a lump of jelly, and there he lies, all in a heap, and starts snorkeling even louder than Miss Plumridge. And then I is hearing my mummy's voice saying, 'Wake up, your breakfast is ready.'" "What a funny dream," Sophie said. "It's a ring beller," the BFG said. "It's a wopsy." Inside the jar, just below the edge of the label, Sophie could see the putting to sleep dream lying peacefully on the bottom, pulsing gently, sea green like the other one, but perhaps a trifle larger. "Do you have separate dreams for boys and for girls?" Sophie asked. "Of course," the BFG said. "If I was giving a girl's dream to a boy, even if it was a really wopsy girl's dream, the boy would be waking up and thinking what a rot-buggling, grink-sludging old dream that was." "Boys would," Sophie said. These here is all the girls' dreams on this shelf," the BFG said. "Can I read the boys' dreams?" "You can," the BFG said, and he lifted her to a higher shelf. The label on the nearest boy's dream jar read as follows: "I is making myself a marvelous pair of suction boots, and when I put them on, I is able to walk straight up to the kitchen wall and across the ceiling. Well, I is walking upside down on the ceiling when my big sister comes in, and she is starting to yell at me, as she always does, yelling, 'What on earth is you doing up there walking on the ceiling?' And I looks down at her and I smiles and I says, 'Told you was driving me up the wall, and now you has done it.'" "I find that one rather silly," Sophie said. "Boys wouldn't," the BFG said, grinning. "It's another ring beller. Perhaps you has seen enough now." "Well, let me read another boy's one," Sophie said. The next label said, "The telephone rings in our house, and my father picks it up and says in his very important telephone voice, 'Simpkins speaking.' Then his face goes white and his voice goes all funny and he says, 'What? Who?' And then he says, 'Yes, sir, I understand, sir, but surely it is me you is wishing to speak to, sir, but not my little son.' The father's face is going from white to dark purple, and he is gulping like he has a lobster stuck in his throat. And then at last he is saying, 'Yes, sir, very well, sir, I will get him, sir.' And he turns to me and he says in a rather respectful voice, 'Is you knowing the President of the United States?'" How fitting. And I says, "No, but I expect he is hearing about me." Then I is having a long talk on the phone and says things like, "Let me take care of it, Mr. President. You'll bungle it all up if you do it your way." And my father's eyes is goggling right out of his head. And that is when I is hearing my father's real voice saying, "Get out of bed, you lazy slob, or you'll be late for school." "Oh, boys are crazy," Sophie said. "Let me read this next one." Sophie started reading the next label. I is having a bath, and I is discovering that if I press quite hard on my tummy button, a funny feeling comes over me, and suddenly my legs is not there, nor is my arms. In fact, I has become absolutely invisible all over. I is still there, but no one can see me, not even myself. So my mummy comes in and says, "Where is that child? He was in the bath a minute ago, and he can't possibly have washed himself properly." So I says, "Here I is." And she says, "Where?" And I says, "Here." And she says, "Where?" And I says, "Here." And she says, sorry. And she yells, "Henry, come up quick." And when my daddy rushes in, I is washing myself. Oh, sorry. And my daddy sees the soap floating around in the air. But of course, he is not seeing me. And he shouts, "Where are you, my boy?" And I says, "Here." And he says, "Where?" And I says, "Here." And he says, "Where?" And I says, "Here." And he says, "The soap, boy, the soap is flying in the air." Then I press my tiny button again, and now I is visible. My daddy is squiffy with excitement, and he says, "You is the invisible boy." And I says, "Now I is going to have some fun." So when I is out of the bath and I have dried myself, I put on my dressing gown and slippers, and I press my tummy button again to become invisible, and I go down into the town and walk into the streets. Of course, only me is invisible, but not the things I is wearing. So when people is seeing a dressing gown and slippers floating along the street with nobody in it, there is a panic with everybody yelling, "A ghost! A ghost!" And people is screaming left and right, and big, strong policemen is running for their lives. And best of all, I see Mr. Grummet, my algebra teacher, coming out of a pub, and I float up to him and say, "Boo!" And he lets out a frightsome howl and dashes back into the pub. And then I is waking up and feeling happy as a whiff squiddler. Pretty ridiculous, Sophie said. All the same, she couldn't resist reaching down and pressing her own tummy button to see if it worked. Nothing happened. Dreams is very mystical things, the BFG said. Human beings is not understanding them at all. Not even their brainiest professors is understanding them. Has you seen enough? Oh, just one last one, Sophie said. This one here. She started reading. "I has written a book. It is so exciting nobody can put it down. As soon as you has read the first line, you is so hooked on it you can't stop until the last page. In all the cities, people is walking in the streets, bumping into each other because their faces is buried in my book, and dentists is reading it and trying to fill teeth at the same time. But nobody minds because they is all reading it too in the dentist chair. Drivers is reading it while driving. Cars is crashing all over the country. Brain surgeons is reading it while they is operating on brains. And airline pilots is reading it and going to Timbuktu instead of London. Football players is reading it on the field because they can't put it down. And so is Olympic runners while they is running. Everybody has to see what's going to happen next in my book. And when I wake up, I is still tingling with excitement at being the greatest writer the world has ever known. Until my mommy comes in and says, "I was looking at your English exercise book last night, and really your spelling is atrocious, so is your punctuation." That's enough for now, the BFG said. "There is dillions more, but my arm is getting tired holding you up." "What are all those over there?" Sophie asked. "Why have they got such tiny labels?" "That," the BFG said, "is because one day I is catching so many dreams I is not having the time or energy to write out long labels. But there is enough to remind me." "Hey, Stephanie. Good to see you. Emily. Oh, I am. Good to see you, baby." "Stephanie, yay. It's the first time I think I've seen you join us. Thanks, babe. I missed you. We'll get into it another time." "Can I look?" Sophie asked. The long-suffering BFG carried her across to the jars she was pointing to. Sophie read them rapidly, one after the other. "I love you too, honey." "I is climbing... she's reading the labels on these ones. "I is climbing Mount Everest with just my pussycat for company." I'm glad you caught me too, hon. Really. Next one. "I is inventing a car that runs on toothpaste." Next is, I is able to make the electric lights go on and off just by wishing it. The next one. I is only an 8-year-old little boy, but I is growing a splendid bushy beard, and all the other boys are jealous. Bob, that's you. That was you, buddy. That's your dream. I is able to jump out of any high window and float down safely. And I has a pet bee that makes rock and roll music when it flies. Now that I would like. What amazes me, Sophie said, is how you ever learned to write in the first place. Ah, said the BFG. I have been wondering how long it is before you are asking me that. Considering you never went to school, I think it's quite marvelous, Sophie said. How did you learn? The BFG crossed the cave and opened a tiny secret door in the wall. He took out a book, very old and tattered. By human standards, it was an ordinary-sized book, but it looked like a postage stamp in his huge hand. One night, he said, I was blowing a dream through a window, and I sees this book lying on the little boy's bedroom table. I wanted it so very badly. You understand. But I is refusing to steal it. I'd never do that. So how'd you get it? Sophie said. Well, I borrowed it, the BFG said, smiling a little. Just for a short time I borrowed it. Well, how long have you had it? Sophie said. Oh, perhaps only about 80 years, the BFG said. But soon I shall be putting it back. And that's how you taught yourself to write? Sophie asked him. Oh, I is reading it hundreds of times, the BFG said. And I is still reading it and teaching new words to myself and how to write them. It is a most scrumdiddlyumptious story. Sophie took the book out of his hand. Nicholas Nickleby, she read aloud. By Doll's Chickens, the BFG said. By who? Sophie asked. Just then, there came a tremendous noise of galloping feet from outside the cave. What's that? Sophie cried. Oh, that is all the giants fizzing off to another country to guzzle up human beings, the BFG said. He quickly popped Sophie into his waistcoat pocket, then hurried to the cave entrance and rolled back the stone. Sophie, peeping out of her spy hole, saw all 9 of the fearsome giants coming past at full gallop. Where is you off to tonight? Shouted the BFG. we is all of us flush bunking off to England tonight. Sorry, where was I? Answered the flesh lump eater as they went galloping past. England is a lucrative land, and we is fancying a few nice little English chittlers. I, shouted the man maid masher, is knowing where there is a giggle house for girls, and I is guzzling myself full of froth blower. My eyes are starting to blur. I think my lashes are sticking together. Sorry. And I knows where there is a boggle box for boys, shouted the guzzle gulper. All I has to do is reach in and grab myself a handful. English boys is tasting extra lick swishy. What did he mean? Sophie asked, poking her head out of the pocket. What is a griddle house for girls? Oh, he is meaning a girls' school, the BFG said. He will be eating them by the bundle. Oh, no, cried Sophie. And boys from a boys' school, said the BFG. Oh, it mustn't happen, Sophie cried out. We've got to stop them. We can't just sit here and do nothing. Well, there's not a thing we can do, the BFG said. We is helpless as horse feathers. He sat down on a large, craggy blue rock near the entrance to the cave. He took Sophie from his pocket and put her beside him on the rock. It is now quite safe for you to be outside until he is coming back, he said. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and it was getting dark. And I'm going to stop there. That's a half hour. I can't believe it went fast. Yeah, 8:07. Oh, I'm over. So the next one is called The Great Plan. And that's where things get really interesting and exciting. So I will wrap it up there. Thank you so much, you guys, for joining me. Bob, you hung in there the whole time. I'm impressed. And Steph, thanks for popping in. Emily, oh, it's always such a treat to see you. You're the one who recommended the book, so I'm always happy when you can catch me. I know life is busy with your family and kids and all the rest of it. So anyway, yeah, I'll wrap it up there. I guess Love, oh, good. I'm glad you let it. Listen, Stephanie, I don't know if you know, but I do it every Monday and Thursday. I would love to see. This is exactly what you'd enjoy. You know, I use swear words and everything at the beginning. Anyway, I love you guys. Have a wonderful evening. Take care of yourselves and each other. And I will see you on Thursday. God, I can't believe it's going to be Thursday again. I don't know why time is going so fast, but I'll see you Thursday at about 7:15. I love you too. Mwah. I love you, Bill. Mwah, mwah, mwah. I love everybody. Take care. Good night.